In this video, we'll go over ways not to overpay for a home. We'll talk about understanding current market value, signs that you're overpaying for a house, and tips to avoid overpaying for a house. Understanding market value. When we're working on a market value, we're looking at a couple of different things. We're going to be taking into factors the neighborhood, what's been going on in the neighborhood, but we can't ignore what's happening in the moment, because ultimately a house is worth what a buyer is willing to pay. Often we have to make adjustments for changing markets. If markets are going down, we can't factor in past properties and how high they sold for. But on the opposite, if the market's going up, then we can't overanalyze what happened in the past. To determine market value, we focus most on the present. What's happening in the marketplace? Are there lots of buyers out there? Are there not lots of buyers out there? How is the competition going? How long is it taking for a property to receive an acceptable offer? We're able to see how long it took for a person to market their property, then go into contract. It's a big variable to understand how hot a particular market is. Some markets you'll look and every house in the neighborhood is selling in 7 days or less. That's a very hot market. Other markets you'll look in the same neighborhood and it's taking 3-4 months to find a buyer. Not so hot of a market. We also need to look at current interest on the home, because not always does days on market mean that somebody else does not like the property. So one of the biggest variables we look at as well is competition. Who else wants the home? Is it just you, or is it you and another buyer? Is it you and 2 buyers? Maybe even more buyers. So we want to know who is wanting the same house at that period of time. Ultimate goal is always 0, but not always the case. Sometimes a house can be on the market for 4 months, and the day that you like it, somebody else likes it. So now there's a competitive situation. We take all of those things into consideration when thinking about, is a home overpriced, or what is it worth? Competitive markets, determining the value of a home can be very tricky. This is where we have to go into a home is worth what a buyer is willing to pay. We can't give a lot of weight to the past properties. We have to give some consideration, especially when you're getting a loan, because sometimes the bank may not agree to the price that you are offering. We found this a lot in the markets that were skyrocketing in value. Buyers were willing to disagree with the bank on their opinions of value and increase their down payment to make up the difference that the banks did not agree with. So although appraisal is an opinion of value, sometimes they're not correct. Sometimes they focus more on historical data, not so much what a buyer is willing to pay. Here's an example. Let's say that overall the homes in the neighborhood were selling for $400,000, but at the time that you're buying, for some reason, the market skyrocketed. Maybe a ton of buyers entered the marketplace. Maybe all of a sudden something changed in the economy that made real estate buying super desirable. Maybe interest rates went down, made payments more affordable, which brought more activity into the marketplace. And let's say a house hits the market in that neighborhood for $400,000, same as the neighbors did in the past. 10 offers hit the property. When 10 offers hit the property, that means buyers are competing for the property. Kind of like an auction, but not really, because you don't know the other prices in the state of Nevada. But you're writing those offers to compete, to win, to outbid the other 9 offers. What's that going to do? Usually drive up the price. Not always, but usually. So now you're going to be driving up that price often beyond $400,000, even though the neighbors sold at $400,000. So now we can't so much use comparable properties as value. We have to take into consideration that 9 other people are willing to drive up that price, and a property is worth what a buyer's willing to pay. So we can't always use spreadsheets and data. One of the biggest variables we have to use is what's happening in that moment in time. Is there competition or is there not? Now, not always is it assumed that's just going to automatically drive up the price. I've had listings where there's been 4 offers and none of them were over asking price. But then what made their offers more attractive is certain people asked for certain costs for the seller to cover, and then some buyers did not ask for costs, which makes the seller more, which makes them choose one offer over the other because their net proceeds are higher. So not always is it price. Sometimes it's the cleanliness of the offer. Was an offer cash? Was an offer financed? Did another buyer have to sell a home? So it's not always assumed to be driving up the price. Sometimes it can just be cleaner offers with less red tape, less hurdles to complete the purchase. That can make an offer more attractive as well. It's not always about price. But like in that 10 offer situations, the odds of somebody not offering over ask is pretty slim to none. That's going to drive up the value of this property more than the neighbors. So we can no longer consider the neighbors, even if the pictures look the same. We have to factor in that 9 other people wanted the property drove up that price, and now we factor in what a property is worth. It's worth what a buyer is willing to pay. Now, let's go back into being the only buyer. No other competition, just you, just the seller. Now, if that's the case, the market has disagreed with the seller's marketing price. They've deemed it overvalued, overpriced. This is your opportunity to start negotiating. This is now where we pivot back into the neighborhood. What has been happening in the neighborhood? What are they selling at? Comparable sales now matter. We don't put in a property is worth what a buyer is willing to pay because you're the only buyer. So it's what you are willing to pay. Now we kick in data. Now we don't have to compete. Now we take a look back at the properties. What is happening? What is happening in the last 90 days, the last 4 months? We take a look at these things. Now, sometimes if a neighborhood is very particular, very special, we will go back a little further. We'll go back 6 months, a year, and then sometimes make market adjustments, inflation adjustments, things like that, to see what is the property worth today. If the last home in a neighborhood that was extremely special, where you couldn't go further away and consider other neighborhoods, and the last sale was a year, we'll take that into consideration. Appraisers do the exact same thing. I often receive phone calls from appraisers asking me about my sales from the previous year when there's homes that just aren't quite the same, so you have to go further back. We will do that as well, then make market adjustments to determine a value of the home. What I do as an agent is I'll put my listing agent hat on and I'll say, based on the home that I saw, based on what I see in the market, what would I have advertised this property at to receive a timely offer? That's typically what I use as my basis of value. And almost always, I will disagree with the current listing agent's marketing strategy because it's not working. If it was working, it would have been pending already. One thing I do take into consideration is days on market. If the property is priced correctly and it's only been on the market for 1 day, I might agree with the listing agent's opinion of value. And I will say, I think this home is priced right and we should come in at this price. But if it's been 100 days, 150 days later, no other people want to offer on the property, then that's when my opinions almost always disagree with the listing agent strategy, and we advise the buyers to come down on the price. Maybe ask the seller to give them money that we otherwise wouldn't have asked for to help with their loan. Maybe add in more contingencies like needing to sell a house, getting the loan, getting the appraisal. Now, even in hot properties, the limitations of a buyer, some things are going to be unavoidable. Almost all finance buyers have to put in an appraisal contingency, making sure that the bank agrees with their offer price. There's only kind of a small period of time during the COVID market where we saw buyers no longer considering that. Every market prior to that, it's very normal to make the offer subject to the bank agreeing to the values. We always have to take that into consideration. How is the bank going to evaluate this property? Now, if you're always trying to get the seller down in price, we can rely heavily on data so we have high confidence that the bank is going to agree to that price. And that's where we come into those comparable sales. What type of homes are we going to consider? We're going to take into consideration the obvious things: garage count, bedroom count, size, age, condition. Was a property remodeled? Was it not remodeled? What does the backyard look like? How extensive of investment was put into the yard, the front yard? Does it have RV parking? Is it a corner lot? And of course, the location. We try to not get very far from the subject property, the property that you want to buy. And this process does not take very long. Typically, by the time our clients like the property, it just takes a handful of moments for an experienced agent to start giving opinions of value, pulling data, talking to the listing agent, seeing what kind of interest and activity is. Of course, we're subject to the response time of listing agents. Not all are created equal. Some respond very quickly and some take a couple of trials to get a hold of. But those variables are very important to deciding what is the proper offering price of a property and making sure that you are not overpaying. What are the signs when you're overpaying for a house? We find the overpayment strategy in the negotiation. Like for me, I'll advise my clients if I think that these offers are getting too high, and if we can't get the seller lower, this might not be the right property for them. We first start with competition. How many buyers are on the property? If there's a lot of buyers, then we might advise going above the asking price or asking for less things from the seller with regards to costs. And if you're the only interested buyer, we will compare the marketing price of that home to the neighbors and see how far apart they are compared to the neighbor's sales. A lot of it will happen in the negotiation. Well, you'll start lower in some kind of aspect, then the seller will issue a counter offer that may not make sense to the data. Anytime we see those type of things is when we start drawing red flags and alarms go off and say, this is getting to a negotiation that's above market value. And you are better off moving on to other homes to try to find a better, more marketable deal. If the seller is being firm on their asking price, but that property's been sitting on the market for 100 days, 200 days, longer, you're overpaying for the property because the market would have already bought it by now. And if the seller's firm on their price, they're unrealistic to market conditions, and there likely is not a deal to be made because we have to have realistic sellers to get market values of property. It is one of the major reasons properties sit on the market for very long is the sellers are too disconnected with buyers' requirements, buyers' standards, and that's why it sits. And offers come in, they don't agree to those offers, and it continues to sit longer on the market. Sellers firm on their price that are on the market for a long time, we find more often than not are overpriced properties. And if you agree to that price, you would be overpaying for the home. Also is the offer behavior. Now, some agents are more transparent than others, but I'll often ask, have you received offers on the property? Sometimes an agent will say, yeah, we received 7 offers, but the seller rejected them all. That tells me that there were market value offers coming in and the seller disagreed. So we might have a disconnected seller, an unrealistic seller in today's marketplace. Sometimes the agent will be transparent because they're here to get an offer for their buyer as well. No, we haven't received an offer yet. We started a little high. We've done price reductions, and we're now getting in the range to receive offers. So you'll get those type of informations from a seller. We can look at the latest price, see if the price reduction is in the range of the market now. Maybe it's still a little too high. We can take a look at those type of things, but how many other buyers wrote offers on the property and what were the outcomes of those offers? Sometimes a seller accepts an offer, but the deal falls apart midway. Why is that? Is there a condition issue that affects the value? And maybe that seller's unrealistic to the severity of that condition and how much it affects the value. So offer history is very, very important to see if you're overpaying for a home. Sometimes you and the seller reach an agreement and the bank disagrees with the price. Now, that depends on the type of market that we're in. If we use the 10 offer example and the market is just skyrocketing, then not always do we give serious consideration to the bank's opinion of value, and we will advise you up front that it is likely the bank's going to disagree to the price, and we have to take into consideration that 10 other people wanted this property. Now, we do try to explain that to the appraiser that 10 other people wanted the property, and this is the price that we're at. Some appraisers take that into consideration, some appraisers do not. So only we see in the skyrocketing marketplaces that an appraiser won't agree with the contract price, but that's still the value of the property. More often than not, in more stable markets, if the appraiser does not agree with your contract price, then it is a situation where it is likely that you overpaid for the property. The goal is to avoid that because you are incurring costs when getting that far along in a contract, trying to get the homework done early so that we don't have those speed bumps along the way. Tips to avoid overpaying. Be fast, but do research up front. Don't just start throwing out numbers that are acceptable to the seller before doing the research first. Don't send out offers before learning about the current marketing activity of the home. How many offers has it had? Does it have offers right now? Is anybody else about to write an offer? How many days has it been on the market? Where does the current marketing price compare to the other properties? Do your homework up front. Then you can figure out if you're properly paying for the property before having to incur costs. Your agent should be your advisor in this process. You shouldn't be on your own about making an offer. How I do with my clients, they'll give an opinion and say, I've looked at the marketing price compared to this. My opinion is this strategy. What would you like to do? That's the approach I take. I'll give an educated opinion after doing research to my clients and then see what they would like to do. Not taking the approach of how would you like to offer just out of the gate with no basis of opinions or data or anything. Have an advisor on your side to give educated opinions and then use that information to make sure that you're off to the right track on making an offer. If you're getting financing, this just happens by default, but get an appraisal. Validate that contract between you and the seller to make sure that you're paying a proper price on the home. It's like getting an impartial second opinion, usually hired by the bank and they represent the bank, but it's another way to validate the contract price. Now, your agent should do analysis to where you have confidence that this property will appraise for the price, or at the very least, your agent should provide you opinions that they have concerns that the bank is not going to agree to this price. Whether you want to carry forward with that is totally up to you, but you should have that precedence. It shouldn't be quite a shock if there's concerns, but if your agent's shocked, then sometimes That happens as well if you have an appraiser that's very disconnected with opinions of value. I've seen it. Watch some of my videos on appraisal. I've had properties where appraisers completely disagree with the price. I disagree with the appraiser. Another buyer comes in, same offer that we did, and they get the property because their appraiser agreed with the price. So remember, this is a human thing and it's all based on opinions. So sometimes it is a shock, but more often than not, there's enough data out there to not have surprises happen along the way. Other ways where this is not quite overpaying, but more like over your comfort level is sticking to your budget. Everybody loves houses they can't afford. Everybody loves the next price point of houses. Don't overextend yourself. Now, it really hasn't having to do with market value, but it still goes into this video to say that stick with your budget. If you are qualified to 750 and under, don't pursue property 775, 790. So because it's not necessarily overpaying for the house itself, but it's overpaying for your financial level of standard. Don't overextend yourself. Stick within your boundaries and your guidelines. We all love houses we can't afford. So focus on the ones that you can truly afford. Then you won't overextend yourself. Kind of a version of overpayment when you are having payments higher than you originally wanted to. So stick within your boundaries. Next, properly researching the home. So market value based on everything we see is correct. We reach a deal. Make sure you get inspections because sometimes the condition of the property will overvalue it. At face value, at the showing, you can't see a thing. Skilled inspectors will come through and show you everything that's wrong with the property. If there's major repairs, let's call it $20,000 in repairs. Well, you wrote the offer not factoring in those $20,000 in repairs. So now due to condition, it went from proper market value to overvalued because there's things that need done. That's why it's so important to get an inspection, is to know about the repairs you have along the way. Now, in resale homes, every home has some level of repairs. We're not talking about little stuff, but sometimes you're going to find big surprises. If you're in a real property, sometimes the well needs redone, $30,000. Sometimes a septic tank needs done, $10,000, $15,000. Sometimes the roof needs redone, $10,000, $20,000. So anytime you have these condition surprises, you can go from paying market value to overpaying right away. That's why we put inspection contingencies in the contract, so that if these surprises show up, you don't have to buy it. Or at the very least, you have the freedom to renegotiate, get the seller to improve the condition back up to the level you thought it was, so that you can carry forward with the price that you paid. Sometimes you'll pay less. Sometimes you'll say, hey, I'd offered you $400 for the house, but now that I've learned it needs $30,000 in repairs, I want $370, $360 for the house, and then I'll take care of my repairs afterwards. So inspections is a very, very important part to making sure that you're not overpaying for the home, because if you don't know what's wrong with it and you get the keys, and then 3 months later you have a $30,000 repair bill, now you just overpaid for the house because you have to factor in that repair to the home's value. That's why inspections are so important. That's why you should always spend as much as you can on the house with inspectors. The more inspectors, the better. That way you can get a true opinion of the property to make sure that you are paying the correct value based on the repairs that are needed. Lastly, don't be afraid to walk away. Normally this happens in the world of repairs. Normally this happens in the world of the bank disagreeing with the price. If you find repairs that are just too great and the seller is being unreasonable on those repairs, and you're sticking with your price and they're sticking with their price, you're overpaying for the home. Know when to walk away. Your agent's going to have contingencies in place to protect you when these surprises come up so that you can walk away without any recourse. Take advantage of those contingencies. If you don't approve the property's condition and the repairs are going to be far greater than what you paid, you're overpaying for the property, know when to walk away. Know when to move on. Pay the inspectors. Be glad you did to educate you on the property. Go find another home. Same with the appraisal. You're going to hire the appraisal. But if the appraiser disagrees with the contract price, whether it be a surprise or something like that, know when to walk away. Know when it's too much. But take into the considerations that I talked about with competition, how many buyers paid for the property, and every home's going to have some level of repairs. But the big stuff, the big surprises, know when to walk away when those costs are too great and the seller's not willing to renegotiate. Apply these tips to make sure that you don't overpay for a home. Know the market value. Be aware of the signs that you're overpaying. Be sure to like and subscribe. Feel free to comment at the bottom. The same questions you have, others may as well, and we always reply to them. Here to help. For the latest insight, tips, and market updates for the Northern Nevada real estate market, be sure to hit subscribe We'll do weekly updates to keep you informed of what's the latest. Also be sure to explore our Northern Nevada house search.